Due to increased internet censorship, truth is under attack like never before. And the truth about the controlled demolitions of the World Trade Center towers on September 11th is just as important as it ever was. To stay updated on our work, make sure you visit ae911truth.org and subscribe to our email list. Also, subscribe to our YouTube channel so you can receive alerts when our videos are posted. No algorithm can silence the facts. By subscribing directly to us, you make it impossible for the censors to stand between you and the information you need to know. Visit ae911truth.org right now and stay connected.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of 9/11 Freefall. I am the host, Andy Steele, and tonight we're going to be joined again by John Schuler. He's been a guest on the show in the past, but he is a very prolific Project Due Diligence volunteer, and he has done 2 presentations recently to the youth of the engineering world, of course, the ASCE student chapters. So he'll be going into that. We're going to be talking about outreach to the young people in this world, particularly the engineers, though we focus a lot of our efforts now too on young people of different interests and future professions as well. Let me give him the formal introduction. John Schuler is a civil engineer with a Bachelor of Science in Civil Engineering from Lehigh University and a Master of Science in Civil Engineering from the University of Alaska Fairbanks. He is a volunteer with Project Due Diligence, and he recently gave some presentations that we will be talking about today. So, John, welcome back to 9/11 Freefall.
Hi, Andy. It's great to be here, as always. Great to be talking with you again.
Thank you so much for going out, doing these presentations, doing the work that we really exist for. I know we put out a lot of stuff. We put out films, we put out a graphic novel. We do all of these things, but it really is to support the work that people like yourself and all the other volunteers at Project Due Diligence are doing, hitting the grassroots of the engineering community, bringing them the evidence that somebody else should have told them about a long time ago. We got to do that work because, I don't know, a lot of our professional institutions and media and government are failing them. That's the essence of PDD. That's my description. But for newcomers, people who may have just woken up to 9/11 last night, briefly remind our audience what PDD is and tell them about some of the great work that our engineers are doing with it.
Yeah, sure thing, Andy. Well, Project Due Diligence is one piece of what Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth does, getting the word out there about the engineering evidence for what really happened on 9/11, which shockingly is very obvious once you take the time to stop and look at it. So we are a group of volunteer engineers who go around and give presentations basically in our state, in our areas, to generally engineering groups, but really anybody who would like them, whether it's engineer groups, student groups, contractor groups, church groups, civic groups, anybody like that, no matter how large or small. So this was a brainchild of Roland Angle, our current leader in AE 9/11 Truth, to get the engineers to talk to the engineers to really try to make some progress there. So far, we've been doing this for several years. I'm not sure how many presentations we've given to over 1,000 people, several thousand maybe. And anyway, so it's very successful. Personally, I think it's a ton of fun. A lot of us in this group have given these, and the presentations we use they're AE 9/11 presentations that a lot of people have spent a lot of time putting together. They are excellent. excellent summaries of the information that's been found. And so that makes it easy to do, holds the interest of the audience. A lot of facts in there. We stick to the engineering evidence. We have one on World Trade Center 7 and then another one on the Twin Towers. And of course, most Americans don't even know about World Trade Center 7. When we all give them, one of the questions we ask at the start is, before this, have any of you heard of, even been aware of World Trade Center 7? And it varies. Recently, it's been a little bit more. About almost half the people have said they're familiar with it or have heard of it. In the beginning, it would be like nobody, maybe one or two people in the group would have said they've heard of it. So it's been memory hold, of course, by the media. But anyway, so yeah, it's a lot of fun. And I'm always surprised. All you have to do is get out there and ask, your colleagues, friends, people who want to know. And it's, not surprising, I guess, but refreshing to me. Sometimes you just strike up a conversation with a friend or a stranger or a colleague, and you'll find out that, yes, they believe there's something fishy or odd about 9/11, and they're looking for, some facts, some evidence about it. So it's great.
I always think, what if we hadn't had an internet, if we had not had a 9/11 truth movement, would there be any mention that a third building had completely, quote, collapsed on September 11th? I think that if we had not had people like yourself and so many other great ones out there talking about this and really focusing on this for the last, how long has it been? Well, 20 years. I don't know how long it took for the 9/11 truth movement itself to get off the ground, maybe a couple of years, but we'll say 20. If we had not had these people dedicating themselves to this effort, nobody would even know that this building had come down. And it is the smoking gun of September 11th. That's why we focus on it so much. Straight down, symmetric. You don't need to be an engineer. You can just watch that building fall and instinctively know that fire did not do this to the building. Do you think that the passage of time has contributed to the response that you just cited, that more people are saying they heard about it and they're open to it? Because I know when I was out there in the black shirts, the street activists, many years ago, people were hostile. They didn't want to hear about this. But time's passed, and now you're getting responses like this.
I really don't know if it's just the passage of time, Andy, or people are seeing things on the internet, or other international and national events are waking them up, getting them curious. I can't say for sure, but the two presentations I recently did, one was the ASCE student chapter at Old Dominion University, and the other one was an actual branch, Lynchburg, Virginia branch of ASCE, but a lot of Liberty University students were there. That's known as a Christian university. They have a pretty new civil engineering department. So two different sides of the state, east and west. But I will say there was, both of these, again, about 50% of the audience said they were familiar with World Trade Center 7, and got tons of great questions, a lot of interest. So my takeaway is, a lot of young people are really awake and curious and interested about this. Maybe it's, just different times with what they've been able to see on the internet. Maybe they're, I don't know why, seeing the propaganda more easily or something like that. But it's very refreshing. It's great. And, I had some reach back after the presentations, even some emails, some students looking for more information. So, we want to encourage that. And I think, though, regardless of if they've heard of World Trade Center 7, when they see the presentation, they're not aware of all the details that go into this and how blatantly false the NIST report is, that the University of Alaska Fairbanks studied this, published a study, the only known collapse mechanism, all this kind of stuff. So as an engineering analysis, it's just a super interesting analysis, finite element details and all sorts of stuff. So it's great for that. And then we have, since there's been a lot of water under the bridge as well, since the UAF study, as far as, lawsuits on getting the government to correct its report, things like that. There's a lot to talk about. What did I want to say? Anyway, but it's the audience members are interesting too. We have a wide variety of people in there. I had a couple certified welding inspectors in the last presentation, and they had some good comments and just a lot of good sort of background. The one fellow had said how he'd, in our World Trade Center 7 presentation, the column where it all supposedly started, the progressive collapse, it's a W14 by 730, which means like people don't understand how massive that is, right? Steel weighs 490 pounds a cubic foot, a solid cubic foot of steel. So every foot of this beam is 730 pounds. I mean, there's that much steel in it. It's so massive. And a fellow said, yeah, he'd worked on one in a fabrication facility. He just had to get some camber in it, and he worked on that for just to get with a rosebud, a really hot propane or acetylene torch. He had to put so much heat into that, could barely get it to glow red. And we see how this stuff supposedly melted, shifted, came down, all this kind of stuff. So a lot of great backgrounds, and some questions are skeptical too. They'll challenge me or our narrative, and which is good. We're open to that. And so they're good questions. They certainly make me think when I give the presentation. But I will say I haven't been stumped yet as far as, man, I have to rethink our presentation. Is this correct? They're good questions though that people come up with. So again, it's a lot of fun.
And we welcome the questions. We welcome the skeptical questions at these presentations. That is what it is all about, is presenting the evidence, having one of those debates like you watch Frankenstein where he's having the debates with the other doctors and stuff. And, but applying it to the real world here with September 11th, this very real, very tragic day that continues to haunt us. I really believe that this just mutilated the destiny of our country. And everything that followed after that has not been very good, I don't believe. So we're trying to right the course. I still believe that if we had a revelation, some kind of official acknowledgement, most people don't believe something until TV tells them to believe it. If we had some kind of official acknowledgement from all of these sources that have been attacking us for years, I think it would have a huge impact on the future of this country. We could build a better one. It would be a renaissance. It'd be a little bit of pain early on as we sorted out punitive actions against those responsible and such, but I believe that we would be better off in the future. Now, what's interesting is you're talking to the youth of these professional societies, and you're going to have to tell me what the difference between the chapter and the branch is, because I've been corrected about that behind the scenes so many times. I need to get a clear definition of what chapter and branch means within the ASCE. But most of these kids, I would say, were either not born yet when 9/11 happened, or if they were still learning how to move their head around. How much of that is a challenge, getting them to see this as a relevant topic, the same way that we do, people who were adults when this happened?
Yeah, and that's a good question, Andy. Also, it hasn't come across to me that way, that it's been a challenge to get them interested or to see it. In both cases, people were interested. They said, "Yeah, it sounds interesting. We want to hear about that." Real quick, I don't know. The chapter and branch difference isn't really, I don't think, anything significant. But we usually refer to student chapters at a university. It's not, they have a sponsor and everything. A branch is more like just in a geographical location for working professionals, whereas a student chapter is really focused on the students at the university. But it really hasn't been a challenge. I think it's just a lot of people are still interested in 9/11, it seems, because they've seen the towers come down. We've re-seen that on TV many times since the day of 9/11. I don't think we've ever seen World Trade Center 7 shown again. That's just too obvious, right? But I took a flight ground class several years ago, and one day we just got to talking about this. Some of the students, and there was a student in the class. She was a sophomore in college in 9/11, and she was a communications major. And when I was talking to her, she said, "Oh yeah, we sat there and watched that, and we saw the first plane hit. So all the cameras are focused on these buildings when the second plane hits, and whatever they learn in communications school," she said, "it was obvious to all of us that this was planned. This was like a perfect type of TV scenario you want to you want to be able to focus people in on. And I mean, I said, wow, you've been walking around with that attitude, that knowledge since you were a sophomore in college it was about 15 years earlier. She said, oh yeah, yeah. But again, people don't want to generally say anything or broadcast their, well, I guess contrarian attitudes, about 9/11. So yeah, people, you talk to them, you find out there's a lot of knowledge and suspicions out there. So I think a group like ours is good, trying to get that together, get a critical mass here. But yeah, I think a lot of the youth are surprised to find out. Well, a lot of people in general, I should say, are surprised to find out the depth, though, when we go into the presentation of just how bad the cover up is, how many, just what was done to cover this up. And it did take, I guess I don't go into a whole lot of detail of how many engineers spent how many hours digging through this, but we do talk about it was people working on their own in their backyard, things like this, where people read this report, saw it was obviously fake, how we've challenged NIST. We can't get an answer. We can't get an engineer to answer. So there's a lot of problems. And I think people hopefully are all walking away with a lot of respect for that. Wow. There's some ethical concerns that will have to be addressed, in your lifetime, in your profession. And they're seeing that.
Right. Yeah. They may not broadcast their contrarian views, but that is the essence of what we do here at 9/11 Freefall practically every week. And I think it's, it's so reassuring because there was a time period where I was really scared that the younger people, like when I was growing up, it was cool to be anti-establishment and challenge things. And that was the essence of every new generation, was to challenge the one before it. But then it seemed to be going in the opposite direction, where the mainstream seemed to be more cool, or whatever you want to call it, whatever they say these days. But now that you have people who just sort of very casually do not believe mainstream narratives like you're explaining here, that is so heartening. And we gotta channel that. We gotta tap into that and normalize not just challenging narratives, mainstream narratives, but also doing something about it, trying to right the wrongs, not just saying, oh, the mainstream media lies. What are you going to do about it? The government is corrupt. What are you going to do about it? We can have better, or at least, something better than what we have right now, and make people believe that. And I think it's by you going out and giving these presentations, talking about this evidence, is how we're going to do that. Now, you had mentioned about the code of ethics, and I was going to ask you about this later, but let me see if I can dig this up right now. Okay. In a newsletter that you send to PDD volunteers, you wrote, ASCE is rewriting their code of ethics from scratch. Why? They have been violating it since 9/11. Let's talk about a code of ethics in context to this issue.
Okay. Yeah. Now, I don't have it in front of me. I don't know the points offhand, but we do bring up some of the canons of the code of ethics at the end of our presentations. And essentially, it revolves around the fact that engineers have a duty to protect the public safety. That's why we get licensed. So the public has confidence that we know what we're doing. Now, there's no law. Typically, I don't know of states that have a law on what engineering ethics are. It's governed by the profession, which is generally American Society of Civil Engineers, ASCE. So not every engineer has to be a member of ASCE. Many aren't. But once you get your professional engineer's license, your state also probably has some sort of state code, which may have a code of ethics with it. But it revolves around the fact that you're only supposed to work within your area of professional expertise, that you essentially have a duty to call out errors, mistakes or misconduct in the profession, that we need to act ethically. So, and I don't remember what the several are in the code of ethics offhand, but basically numerous ones were violated by what went on, by engineers and others who should have known better, with what was going on with 9/11. So, and this is, when a lot of our volunteers, we contacted NIST about their report and pointed out the errors, and some of them they acknowledged. I mean, major errors that would have changed the whole analysis if they redid it, and they never did. just kept this published report out there and acknowledged some of the mistakes. Didn't change anything though. So again, we've never gotten an engineer from there to respond to us. In fact, on their report, there is no name on the report, no individual's name, no PE stamp. It was like an assembled conglomeration of stuff that just the agency, NIST put out. But that's where that stands. But that's been a problem, we think, for, violating code of ethics. And again, we're trying to encourage, when we give this presentation, engineers, you are facing an ethical challenge right now, and you probably will. And what will you do about it? So I think it's a good step to motivate courage, and especially students, young engineers, about this, and what they might do, facing it with this kind of situation. But anyway, then I heard that, actually saw it in print, that ASCE is working on rewriting their code of ethics. I don't know what that's about, who's involved, things like that. But I don't know what's wrong with the current code of ethics, but apparently it needs to be rewritten, and it's going to be done from scratch, whatever that might mean.
Well, maybe there's CYA. Who knows? That's speculation. I don't know. But, it's something that I've learned. I've been doing 9/11 for a long time. And of course, you see other conspiracies and stuff like that. I don't necessarily believe all of them, but I just am exposed to them and such. And you'll hear people make these arguments. Again, I'm not making a judgment one way or the other on it. I don't know. But there's people make these arguments about being free men and stuff, and that if you go into court and you do a certain thing and you turn around 3 times, whatever, you can get away with doing this, and the judge has to do that. And what I have learned over time is there can be rules on the books, there can be standards, there can be ethics, but really it comes down to who has the most money and power to get away with something. Now, you can challenge that by doing what we're doing and going to the grassroots and getting on shows and such, and getting the public outraged over this issue. But ultimately, I think that a lot of times when they write these things like codes of ethics, organizations, they're going to do what they want to do. And they're going to put these things out as lip service to make it seem like they're following some kind of moral standard. But really, they're going to do what they want to do. And I think the only way that you fight them is by taking them on, making a situation where giving you what you want is a lesser burden to them than keeping it secret. So we have to change that environment. But what do you think of everything that I just spilled out there? I mean, do organizations, are they obligated to really follow these codes of ethics, especially when it comes to something as big as the cover-up of the World Trade Center evidence?
I guess I would agree with most of what you said there. They're really not binding unless somebody makes them binding, and that takes some action. Somebody has to accuse somebody, bring some action, go through a body of the professional organization, work through their rules and committees and things like that. And of course, we've been stymied on the journals, for ASCE. We can't get a rebuttal paper in, all kinds of bad excuses or no reasons given, things like that. So that's been a problem. So that's exactly what you're talking about. They hold the power, and they're just going to, doesn't matter how blatantly false their story is, they're going to stick to it. Now, I will say, though, with some of these things, when organizations do have rules to right wrongs, I'm going to say I think a lot of times people don't take advantage of those, but I mean in a good way. If you have whistleblower laws and you have ethics rules and you have this kind of thing in an organization or in society generally, they are there for the tough times. And when those tough times, they're not there for the easy everyday stuff when everybody agrees and thinking the same way on an issue. They're there for when they're needed. And too often people have those kind of options at their disposal, but they just don't want to use them because either they don't, the typical phrases, things like, I don't want to rock the boat. I don't want to make a big issue of it, or I'm afraid of retaliation. So those, I mean, that's a good reason. That's possible, right? It's too much work. All kinds of stuff like that. And those are about, it usually is a lot of work and a lot of pain in the neck. But, I mean, you could say that all the way from the Constitution all the way down to individual organizations. So yes, in theory, we have constitutional rights, but if nobody wants to stick up for them, I guess you really don't have them. If you let yourself get steamrolled, and so it's not always that cowardly in action, but it's just that, like you say, when the mainstream media doesn't even tell you about World Trade Center 7, there's a lot of cover up, things like that. So people, I mean, I respect my fellow Americans. I think we're like the frog in the proverbial, pot of boiling water. Heat's gone up. We don't even know how hot it is anymore. But it's so bad. And, but, when people don't see these things, well, unless something happens to wake you up, you might not see it, because that's what you're driven to, all this propaganda every day, the mountain of lies, the mountain of nonsense every day. So, when you talk to somebody, you don't know what it might be, but, somebody talked to me one time that got me thinking and woke me up. And I think I've said this before on your show. I am thoroughly ashamed and disgusted at myself that it was about 17 years. I never thought once to question the 9/11 narrative, the official narrative. I never thought once to think about this for myself. I never, and then finally somebody said something that made me think, and I started to look into it. And again, having gone to University of Alaska Fairbanks, which issued this report, was a big help in getting me interested. It just all came tumbling down in a matter of weeks, and it was just so bad. So you never know who you'll wake up, but it's something I guess each individual has to see, or something has to happen to them, or they have to experience it. And then it's just, you can't unsee things again.
Right. Well, and the thing is, there's critics out there. Some of it might be your tax dollars at work out there, trolling, professional ones. But they'll say, it's been 24 years. How many years it's been since 9/11? I'm not good at mental math. But enough. Around that time, we're close enough. Been 24 years since September 11th, and you have not gotten a new investigation. It hasn't been acknowledged by the government. This is a failure. It's a waste of time. AE 9/11 Truth should just pack up and leave the internet and cease to exist, because you can't get a new investigation. They say that, right? But when TV was first introduced to the American public, there was actually, from what I've heard and read, there was actually a lot of concern by people that this was going to be used as a tool of brainwashing. Mm-hmm. And in a certain way, whether it's overt or covert, it's served that purpose. Where the president, when he's pushing an agenda not related to 9/11, goes to television shows to work in plot lines about his agenda, works with them if he's got a good relationship with them, where you see how the elections are kind of controlled, and everything's kind of kept to the two parties. The wedge issues are pushed to the front, other issues are pulled back, other candidates aren't really covered that well. Look up Larry Agron, you can see that in the film Spin. So in a way, whether or not it was purposely designed to be that, it has become that. So over the years, with people being used to this kind of brainwashing and this much media control over the public, it is a very difficult thing to overcome. But the fact that we exist and we continue to push this forward and we make these gains and we're able to challenge them is a success, because what people lose sight of is the fact that exposing a crime this big, even when the evidence is so obvious, is a very difficult thing to do. So if we can get our people onto interviews, if we can get this kind of reach into the engineering community where they begin to question this event, and we're doing this without the resources of CNN or Fox News, MSNBC, any of those things, this is actually a hallmark to the success of AE 9/11 Truth, and the fact that we continue to do this and continue to exist. And believe me, folks, I won't get into it now, but they are trying everything they can to squash us. is a sign of our success. Nothing worth doing is done overnight. I always cite abolition of slavery. That took decades. A lot of people making sacrifices for many years for there to be any action on that issue. And I'll be honest, John, people like you and the other Project Due Diligence volunteers, they are my heroes, not necessarily even all the people trying to jump out front and sell everybody on how important and indispensable they are to the movement. My heroes are the people that get up in the morning, drive hundreds of miles to make that presentation. Maybe the only spotlight they get on their efforts are coming on here on 9/11 Free Fall, and they don't do it for the accolades. They do it for the justice and for getting that information out there. So I think that this has been a success here. AE 9/11 Truth and all the engineers at Project Due Diligence keeping this going, and just for the inroads that we've made. I don't know. What do you think?
Well, yeah, it's certainly the fact that this organization exists and has done so much. Yeah, I have had colleagues tell me, it's surprising things that you find out how you are making an impact. The organization is making an impact because of just stories you hear, things like that. But yes, this is I don't know what it's just nobody gets paid to do any of this. We do it. We've had a lot of people helping out. I'm flattered to be called a hero. Certainly don't think of myself that way, but I am honored to be working with the people in this movement. I know you do a ton of work on this. You brought so much to it. Your graphic novels are outstanding, things like that. And again, these fellows that just engineers on their own just analyze stuff and brought truth to this. They just did it on their own. I'm just amazed by that how they apply their knowledge and went about this, and it all has come together in our presentations and report. So it's a wonderful group of people to be with, to be involved with. I love it. And I don't know, to me, what's more exciting, more fun, going and giving a presentation or sitting home and watching another basketball game? How much of that can you do? Again, it's this is a great opportunity to get out there and meet people, just see things, talk to people, and you always learn something. Giving the presentation, the audience learns something, and wonderful people out there.
Well, yeah, and that's the thing. I would rather be working with a small group of people. I'd like it to get bigger, but I'd rather be working with a small group of people, maybe 100, who are focusing in on this important event, focusing on things that are actually based on evidence, not just some political agenda. I'd rather be working with them than with some, big conglomerate group of supporting a presidential candidate, for instance, where you're just some cog in the wheel. I've worked for a organization like that. And for me, it was just a gig. I was just making money, but they put you in a van. They drive you to some town in upstate New York. Maybe it's 50 miles from where you live, and they give you a script and tell you to go knock on doors and then write a number to gauge what the person's response is. And then you give that back to them. You get your money, and they go feed that into some computer. That is soulless. That is heartless. That is being a cog in a machine. But here at AE 9/11 Truth, we have these people who are genuinely interested in the engineering jargon and the engineering specifics of the controlled demolitions of September 11th at the World Trade Center, and are out there doing something about it. Now, something I wanted to ask you, going back to your presentations here, Old Dominion, Liberty University, I believe I saw somewhere that at Liberty University that you had the faculty mixed in there with the students.
Yes.
So, you might think there could be a difference in the reactions. Was there a juxtaposition, any differences in the reactions from faculty than with students?
No. I would say everybody was very supportive. There were students, there was faculty, there were, engineers from local businesses, right, from the community, all sorts of people in that audience. So it was a mix, and I would say it's, some people don't say anything, so I don't know, but some had great questions, always new stuff for me to think about. But no, the faculty actually, I'd spoken to the faculty before COVID, went out there and give a presentation. And it was the faculty, again, very supportive then. So, people, just being honest, you see this, you can't believe it. If you're not aware of World Trade Center 7 before. And so, yeah, they're not out to cover it up.
Well, that's good news, and they need to start talking about this. Now, I know there's a backlash. I know when you're working for institutions such as a university, you got to play a game somewhat. I would like to see the rogue professor go out and start talking about the World Trade Center evidence. However, I'm not in their shoes, and I'm not the one who is dependent on their paycheck, and I don't know their story. So I understand it. But I know that it's difficult to work for those, institutions. Now with the students, they gotta make a grade. I get that. But outside of classes, they have extracurriculars, they have free time, and they have that energy. How much power do the students within these chapters have to bring this issue to the forefront of discussions on campus?
I don't know. Really, I guess in both, especially one where it was a student chapter, it was easy. The students wanted to do it; they were allowed to do it. As far as I know, they didn't receive any backlash from it or anything like that. So it seemed to go very well. I had previously another university I worked with. The one professor, he demonstrated extraordinary courage, having to stand up to people who didn't want this presentation, went and gave it, and it was fine. It was, nobody, got distraught over it or anything like that. Nobody in the audience. So there are, courageous people out there, and there have to be. But again, it's more of a, I view it professional to professional, which is what the chapter should be for. Looking for interesting presentations with the engineering analysis, the ethical portion, of course, topic of great interest, the forensics. Again, we've got, we're discussing all sorts of technical subjects like buckling, finite element analyses, stiffness matrices, all sorts of stuff, and then you just show the videos too. And again, like you said, you could be a fourth grader and sit. It's like, come on. Sometimes you just have to put all your adult knowledge aside and see things, as they are. But anyway, yeah. So and you had asked before too about, kind of how indoctrinated we are. And it used to be the cool thing to be anti-establishment. And now it's like, that's just seems to be so taboo everywhere. And it is, people, again, I think it's like we don't know how much the heat has been turned up. We just can't feel it. It's been so long, so continuous. I guess you might say slowly, but maybe really not. Maybe it has been pretty rapid. But, I guess as long as the bread and circuses keep flowing, a lot of people are going to be content with it.
Well, sometimes you got to make your own standard. I remember when I went to college, my first week orientation, I met this girl who said, I want to start an environmental group. This college doesn't have one. So she started it, and I only joined it for the girl because I liked her. But but she got members, and that group might still be there for as far as I know. I remember, I wanted to do cartoons for the school paper. They didn't have a cartoonist. They didn't want to have them. So I just started it myself, started distributing it. And then I started collecting money for advertising for various things. It became very popular for those 2 years that I went to that particular university before I transferred. So sometimes you got to go out and create the stuff for yourself. All right. Be that innovator. If something doesn't exist, you go out and make it. And what's the worst thing that could happen, especially if you're a student? Or what's the worst thing that could happen? Maybe you don't get a bunch of people to come join your club. But I say, if you can't talk about this at your ASCE student chapter, then you go create your own group. Call it, I don't know, what's a modern name? Seth's 9/11 group, or maybe you want to talk about various things, right? But at the forefront, talk about this World Trade Center evidence. You can get the presentation from AE 9/11 Truth. Give the presentation to yourself, even if it's non-engineering students who are coming. Maybe it's people in nursing. Maybe it's people who want to be actors. Who cares? Who cares? It doesn't have to be a future engineer that takes this up. Maybe it's somebody that figures out how to get this out in some other way, but just take that initiative and start your own group. It's not that hard. I don't know if it's hard today. It wasn't that hard back then to do your own thing. And with the zine that I published, I didn't even create an official group. I just did it and distributed it, and it took off. So you can do that out there for serious things. Interesting though, with young people. Okay, there's advantages and disadvantages with young people and older people. Younger people, I think that older people have a lot of energy that come here to AE 9/11 Truth, but that's the cliche. Younger people have more energy and such, but they're at the beginning of their careers. All right, so they have more to worry about. They're not retired and already getting their pension or whatever. And so how much of a challenge is that in waking up people who are at the beginning of their careers who feel they have something to lose?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know how many of them will actually, get involved in something like this, but it's obviously a concern to many people. And we might have talked about this once before, but really, when the volunteers do discuss this, when people are concerned that they're going to be retaliated against or something, we don't know of a single person where it's actually happened. Now, maybe that's because some people are preemptively not going down that route. That could well be. But the adage, something about worrying about stuff, and most of it never happens. I'm sure it's put more succinctly elsewhere, but a lot of worry comes to nothing. I guess we do have our concerns. There are things to be concerned about. But frankly, maybe the engineering profession is even a little bit more tolerant of that, because if we are basing it on facts, then what else can you say? There are some other truth groups that are tiny by comparison, because you are absolutely overburdened by the authorities if you try to speak out. So anyway, I think it's a good topic for us to bring up and to get out there, because again, the facts are so there for us, so obvious. You just have to be the slightest bit curious, and you see it. And it's just hard to argue with.
Well, here's what I'll say to engineers out there. I understand. I'm more tolerant now than I was in the past, and that's just wisdom and experience of people who may not be able to go out and scream about the World Trade Center evidence from the hills because they haven't got a certain job, or they've got kids they're raising, whatever, right? But you can still help out Project Due Diligence just by bringing your knowledge and experience. All right. If you come to us and you say, John, Andy, I can't be out front, but I'd be happy to consult with you guys and tell you how to get more presentations in your area for the people that can give these talks. We're going to listen. We're going to talk to you. We're going to take it, and we will keep it confidential. We won't tell anybody that you're helping us. But you can contribute that way. You can write for us. And if you want to use a pen name, we're cool with that. But we would love to have more engineers writing scholarly articles for AE 9/11 Truth about certain 9/11 factoids. Let's say you want to focus in on column 79. You've got some new angle regarding that entire aspect of the World Trade Center 7 evidence, for instance. Mm-hmm. We'll let you do that. So there's more ways to help than simply giving the presentations. And when I say simply, I don't mean to, I'm not saying that in a dismissive way, because that is a big thing, going out and giving these talks. But if you're worried, I can't really help out because I can't be out front like that, you can still come help us in other capacities. So there's ways to help out, even if you don't want to be famous for doing it.
Oh, yeah. That's for sure. Yep.
One way that we traditionally reach out to young people, which is sort of the focus of today's show, is that we talk about how this issue is affecting current issues, how it's affecting the world today. And something I have to bring up, because I haven't gotten your take on this yet, but right now we're taking our case against NIST to the Supreme Court. All right. They have a lower court in DC has ruled that unless federal agencies are mandated by Congress, unless it's in the specific language when they issue a report that they have to be accurate, that they have no obligation to be scientifically accurate when they issue these reports. So that doesn't give us any informational standing as a consequence. But, there's certain words I use when I'm off camera about what this is. I'll just say that this is not going to stand in my mind. And we have to challenge it, and we are challenging it right now. But what is your take on that whole issue, and how does this impact the young people coming up with the country that they're growing up into?
Oh, yeah. Well, it's certainly something to be concerned about for everybody. So I'm not overly familiar with all the legal actions there, but yes, we wanted to get the government to write a new report, NIST, because it was inaccurate, and we showed that, and they've admitted it's inaccurate, and went to court and lost because the court ruled that the law only says the government has to issue a report. I'm not sure if that was for, only if under the Data Quality Act, or only for disasters or investigations, or I don't know what all that covered. But anyway, yes, the government has to issue a report in some cases. And so, stupid us, just being generally decent, honest people, assume that means a report with some integrity, right? of a correct report. But no, it doesn't, apparently. So that is a standing law in America right now, that when the government issues a report like this on, say, 9/11, it is okay for it to be false, inaccurate, made up, whatever. That's perfectly okay. So that's why, and again, I guess it's our group with maybe lawyers for 9/11 Truth or private attorneys taking it to the Supreme Court to try to get that overturned if the court will hear it. So we'll see what happens with that. But it's astounding to think about. So I guess it was always that way because that's what the government did. Now that it's been clarified in court, that's the standing law in America. So that's where we are. And if that doesn't shock people or get you curious about something, boy, what will? But yeah, it's amazing. So for example, the bridge in Baltimore that was just hit. I don't know if that will be investigated by the government in a similar fashion or not, and if that would fall under the same set of circumstances where, say whatever, who cares? Doesn't have to be accurate. Who knows?
Well, it feels like we've fallen butt backward into an issue that's even bigger than the World Trade Center issue, if that is even possible. I didn't imagine it would be possible. But this has an effect on the future because, again, let's say you have some issue where there's cancer clusters in a certain area. The president's best friend owns the company. Government issues a report saying, you know what? We don't think that this polluter is causing this to happen. Some activist group challenges that. People tend to look at government reports as being their best effort. Right? When something comes from the government, they think that the government is doing its own due diligence and trying to put out the best report that they possibly can. But now this means that government reports are subject to politics. And that is not a good thing. We don't want to set that standard. So we have to challenge that. And one of the things we were concerned about when we were talking to Mick about this is that if this doesn't go our way, then we set a new precedent that can be open the door basically to the government just saying whatever they want to say. They can blow their nose into a hanky, hand that to you, say that's a report. Now I'm being a little tongue-in-cheek with that description there, but really what's to stop them? So we were worried, hey, maybe this will make things worse, but I believe in putting it in their faces and saying, hey, look, do or not do, but tell us, do you have to be accurate with this? And, there may be some things that happen if the Supreme Court doesn't hear this or if they don't rule in our favor as a result too, but I'm going to play that close to the vest for now. And
Andy,
we have to.
Yeah, also mention in a similar vein, there are a lot of serious consequences to a bad report like NIST did. So, for example, they came up with this progressive collapse mechanism that had never been seen before in history by anyone, and it's fake, but that's what their report is. And so then they said, well, in the future, engineering codes should change to prevent this from happening. So it's been 20 years, no code has changed essentially. So, these super skinny, slender buildings are going up in New York, and nobody's worried about progressive collapse. But it's finally at the point, of course it had to come, where yes, now in some places, people are trying to design codes for this non-existent progressive collapse theory. So that's a problem. That's going to basically falsify our whole profession, make people chase down codes for non-existent reasons. But also, the firefighters on 9/11 went into the building because they had no fear that it was going to collapse on them. This never happened before, a steel frame building collapsing due to fire. So in the future, if this progressive collapse theory is actually codified and made to be a serious thing, if you're in a high-rise building and it catches fire, and surprisingly this happens a lot more than I thought, for sure, a lot of cases of serious high-rise fires, will the firefighters come in? Will they try to save anybody? Because now the theory is, this building could collapse after just an hour of burning fires. So with everybody being so risk adverse now, organizations so risk averse, are the fire companies going to say, well, no, we cannot go into that building after a certain time. You're on your own. So this has, such serious consequences for public safety. Obviously, especially in high rises. But this is a route society is going with this stuff. And so we're trying to do what we can to blow the whistle on this, to wake people up, because this will certainly cost lives in the future. Without a doubt, if this kind of nonsense keeps up.
Well, that's the thing. We are fighting for an acknowledgement. We say a new investigation, obviously, but once that investigation comes to its conclusion, we're confident, if it was honest, they would acknowledge that they brought these buildings, 3 ones, World Trade Centers 1, 2, and 7, were brought down in controlled demolitions that day. So we fight for that, but also I want to inform, there's a reason why the commercial that runs at the beginning of the free falls right now, talking about keeping connected to us by subscribing to our emails, because YouTube isn't cooperating with us with their algorithms. There's a reason that final picture is of a kid on his computer, because we are also reaching out to the future. That's a concern of mine, because even if we never got a new investigation, which I'm still optimistic we will, I don't do things to lose, but even if we never did, just by talking about this, by creating this history, this record of all the efforts of these engineers and other people, and everything that they did to try to get this to the forefront, and whether there have been successes or mistakes made or whatever, we create this record. And I am also doing this work speaking to that future, that kid out there, that 16-year-old, maybe sitting in detention or something, secretly watching their phone, or sitting home alone at night, getting into this, so that the kind of deceptions that your government runs, and you carry that forward into your future, and maybe some other event happens in the future, something very similar, and you can pick up where we left off and take what we have learned and apply it to your own truth movement in the future. And I think that is absolutely so important to affect that future moving forward. What do you think, John?
I totally agree. Totally agree, Andy. We've got to try to reach, touch the present to reach the future, and get the message out there and carry it forward. Because without it, we're really in a hard place, and everybody will feel it one day. And all that.
All right. Now, well, you started to cite that Mark Twain quote earlier about, the things you worry about most never happen. I always butcher quotes. I can never think of the exact wording when I'm here on the air, but that's the essence of that. I can tell you that after doing this for so long, you run into every calamity you can possibly imagine, everything that can go wrong, you will experience it. And you know what you learn at the end of the day? You learn that it's not that big of a deal. You'll survive it. And you'll be stronger and better for it.
100%.
And so,
yep, adversity does bring out the best. It sure does.
That's right. I listened to these first episodes of 9/11 Freefall from back in 2012. I sound like Porky Pig. I'm talking so fast. I'm so worried about every word I say. I don't even worry about it so much anymore. And I think the shows are better as a result. And you will experience that too out there. So if you are somebody that's on the fence, you're worried about trying to make a difference, you're worried about some consequence befalling you, it probably won't. It probably won't. Most of it is probably just shadows in your mind. But honestly, in most cases, I think that consequence is the best thing that could happen to you. It'll make you better, stronger, tougher, more of a weapon out there for spreading truthful information. And I think you need to go through that experience, through that journey, and just go ahead and sign that petition at AE 9/11 Truth. What do you think about that, John?
Yep, I agree, Andy. I mean, sometimes people ask, well, wow, you believe this? I mean, doesn't that unsettle your mind to know what's to think that these buildings were brought down by controlled demolition, or the government was involved in it, or whatever it might be? I'm like, no, it feels great. You find the truth and you stick with it. You hold on to it. You clutch it. It's a beautiful thing. And why wouldn't you want to go after the truth? Why would you just, just that moral decay that comes in with having to live lies, and it just you just feel so much better when you are able to see things more rightly. So yeah, it's great. And yeah, people who are helping out with this obviously feel the same way. And yeah, you're right. I mean, we haven't given up everything so far, so I don't know what to say, but it's really been a pleasure for the most part. I just like these, everybody I work with this group is great. Going out there and meeting the people we give the presentations to, I just, it's just wonderful. You meet so many good people, so many concerned people, and I guess just like fear or cowardice can be contagious, so can courage, and we all help each other, and I think it helps us all grow.
I think I'm ready to go another 15 years.
Exactly. Yep.
No, we'll go as long as it takes to get this done, and in the meantime, we're keeping a record as well. So even if they manage to pull some nonsense or whatever, and get me separated from AE 9/11 Truth, there will still be a record, and it'll be like Obi-Wan Kenobi. Strike me down, I'll be more powerful than you can ever imagine. Mm-hmm. So, John, thank you so much for hitting the streets, going to these presentations, driving to them, and getting the PowerPoint up, talking to these people, being that face out there in person, bringing this evidence, keeping it alive. And we are moving forward. We'll see what happens with the Supreme Court, but we got a lot of tricks up our sleeve for the next year. So keep on checking out our emails, going to ae911truth.org, and of course, following Project Due Diligence and watching 9/11 Freefall.
Well, my pleasure, Andy, and thank you. Definitely.
Hit that notification bell and slam the like button and subscribe. Thanks.